little bit of sunshine. Oh, okay. Right. So we are recording. This is it. So welcome to today's webinar, to the session about understanding the creative type. You've got David Butterworth here, and you've also got Julie Mansfield. We're going to be taking you through this session today. And we're really excited about this one. So it's exciting because not only are we talking about this, but we're also going to be sharing a little bit more about our own personal stories, because as you might have already seen, you are talking to two facilitators who've got the creative type profile as well. So we're going to be sharing a little bit about our experience today as well. So let's talk about the agenda, what we've got for today. The slides will come back up in a moment. No noise. That's okay.
That's me
In fact,
listening.
I was right. I thought perhaps you took off because you wanted to do a little hello and say hello, but
Wait, no, I'm letting people in, and I can't see how to do that with the.
with the slides in. Okay, no worries.
It's
That's
open.
fine.
I
I
just
can still
appreciate,
carry.
David, I
Sorry.
just appreciate the fact that you've changed your shirt, as opposed to the picture in the first slide where Julie clearly hasn't
I
changed the
just have the
shirt. So
one.
This has got the same top on. Love it.
Right.
Here we go. So this is our plan of action today. Um, it looks, I don't know whether it's full screen on that one, but Julie, it looks like I can see all the slides underneath. So I don't know whether you're sharing. Here we go. Just, yeah, put it into.
No,
No,
sorry.
that's right. No worries. Here you go. That's it. So what have we got in store for you today? So we know we start at 9:30. We go right through to 11 o'clock. Don't we? So that's an hour and a half. We've got 90 minutes. What we're going to be talking about. So we're going to talk about, so what is the creative type? Get a clarification of that, how it actually shows up. And then we're going to ask you to go into groups to think about, so what is your experience? What's your experience of being creative type? Then we're going to find out, so what's it like being a creative? And Julie, could you get the door? And what we're going to do is we're going to share our personal stories about what it's like being a creative type. Then we're going to delve into, so why may somebody be in that creative position? And we're going to help to do that by exploring some of the creative graphs. And then think about, if you're doing a debrief for somebody who you may have in your organization who is a creative. So imagine you're getting the profile coming through and think, right, how best do I explore this profile and also sort of coach them? We're going to give you some tips and some helpful elements to actually think about how to question with them. Then we can think about, so what if you're thinking about that creative person within a team, what's going to be the impact? And then we will finish off with, so how can we help in terms of, we've got some materials for you and some links that we're going to send afterwards. So that's the plan for today. So that's the agenda. Thank you, Julie. So let's start off by just getting clarification of what do we mean by the creative type? What is it?
Oh,
So
sorry.
that's right. So a person who shows up in the creative position is if their conscious persona graph, so it's the graph on the left, is their dominant and auxiliary color images are opposite on the insights world. So the possible combinations are red first, then green, or green, then red, or yellow, then blue, or blue, then yellow. So what you can see is where the opposites come onto the team wheel, whether it's red and green, yellow and blue, blue and yellow, and the opposites of those, that's what we mean. And it's quite strange because very often we talk about dealing with our opposite type, don't we, when we're giving a debrief. And sometimes we might say, if somebody is leading with green, they might say, well, their opposite type, opposite color, may be red. But actually what we're noticing in creative types, this is their second color. That's what we mean by auxiliary. So the dominant being the first, auxiliary being the second. So that's what you're going to see about that. So when we look at the overall insights database, we know that this is the latest stats for them. 9% of all insights learners on the insight learning database are creative types. So which means their first and second color images are opposites. So within the insights discovery wheel, there's a possibility of 24 creative positions around the world, and we're going to look at that a little bit later. So it can come up whether into the accommodating, it can come up into the classic, or into the focus. So gradually as we get into the will as well.
Okay, so I've got a quick question before we go any further.
Yeah, go for it.
Hands up or into chat. How many of you at the moment or in the past have been creative types? It's interesting, isn't it? Because 1 in 10 of our delegates is likely to be creative as well. And this isn't a insights creation. This is something that Jung talked about as well. And I do find, David, I don't know if when you're working with colleagues, the label itself, creative,
Yes.
was
Yeah.
debriefed yesterday, and the
Yeah.
individual went straight to, yeah, I do feel that I'm quite creative and I'm quite artsy and I like doing that. And thinking, no, it's the Jung used the phrase creative. It isn't even an insights, it's a Jungian phrase. And he specifically referenced the creative dynamic in
That's it.
how people work. But it's one of those labels, isn't it? We've just got to be careful with.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's I'm glad you pointed out straight away, because that's something you can easily get stuck into straight away by with these labels comments. Oh, the creative type. Oh, I'm creative. Yeah. So it's really good just to clarify that right at the start. So in a moment, we're gonna put you, we invite you, sorry, not put you, we're going to invite you to go to a breakout, because we want to know what's been your experience of creative types, and also what are those questions that you want us to cover today. So with the time, as I say, within our 90 minutes within this webinar, we want to hear what are those things that's going to interest you, so we can make sure we cover those off today. So what's those questions that you want to find out? So we're going to give you about 10 minutes. And when you go into your groups, firstly, you might want to start off by introducing yourself, just saying hi to everybody in the room. And then like you to discuss maybe what's been your experience of creative types within your group. And also then we'll get some feedback from each of the groups to think about, so what questions would you like us to cover today? What are the things that you're interested? So we really appreciate you joining the webinar and being with us today. I appreciate you taking the time out from your work today to be here. So let's make it worthwhile for you. Let's work out, so what are those things that could be really important for you to do that? So Julie's going to invite you to go to these breakout groups. You just need to click yes, and then you'll be put into a group. And then we're going to bring you back in about 10 minutes. Is that about right, Julie? Is that, you've got enough? Have you done the rooms by now? Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so off you go. I think, yeah, we're going to take you into the rooms. We'll see you back in about 10 minutes. So it's about 9:50 back in the room. So welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good conversation.
As you're coming back, I've just put into chat a little stat that I found. We say that 9% of people have creative graphs, and of that 9%, smaller number have focus with just one colour above the line. 2% have classic, and the remaining 6% have 3 above the line. So, David, I'm feeling quite special.
Sorry, I can't see anything in the chat. Wait, there's the normal chat. I can't see anything in that chat.
Oh, right. Let's just repost it and see if that's.
Well, so Fiona,
no, it's come through. It's come through now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Brilliant. No, thank you for saying that, Fiona. I wouldn't have known that. It might be because I put it in while you guys were in breakouts.
Yeah.
Right.
So
okay.
We would love to hear from you, wouldn't we, Julie?
Yes,
wouldn't we?
Please. We had a group with Lynn. Was Lynn able to get microphone working, if not camera? Brilliant.
Yes, Julie, camera not working, but I did get the microphone.
We'll go with that. Dilip, Lynn, Priya, questions, comments from the discussion in your breakout?
Lynn, Priya, you're happy to do it. I'm happy to do it, but it might be wonderful to hear from you.
Yeah, I can start maybe. I thought it was a really good contextual conversation around some of our expectations and from what we're looking for from this session today, which is very much around, for me, it was more around actually, it's very easy. Oh, it's not easy, but we're now training individuals to identify other people's preference and how best to communicate with them. And actually, how do we identify a creative type when they switch, or very easily can switch from being a red and go into a green, or the other way around, vice versa, because it can really kind of throw you off a little bit. So we had a little bit of discussion around how to identify those creative types. Don't know, Dilip, if you want to go.
Yeah, sure. Lynn, did you want to say anything first? And then I'm happy to go.
So, pretty much what Priya said, do it. But for me, it's in those sessions, because you don't get a lot of time when you're doing an introductory section. I try and demonstrate just to highlight for the individual. And I've been lucky enough to always have a creative, so it's quite good. What that might look like on the receiving end of that, and just to make them aware of their impact. But actually don't tend to go further. So this session is great, just really how we can go into it a bit more deeper, because I'm starting to do coaching sessions.
Yeah.
One of the people I'm coaching that's coming up is actually a creative. And yes, I can do the basic, but I feel like I want to be able to go a little deeper and, than what I tend to do. So, yeah.
We're definitely going to do that, Lynn.
Great.
Philip, anything you want to add?
Only a lovely phrase that Lynn used, which is the bridge between the two opposing color energies, is such a lovely transition. So the bridge between the two is and Priya used the word authentic, that they can show their wonderful, for example, green energy, and then switch in an instant to that wonderful red energy, and it's seamless and it's genuine.
Absolutely, totally authentic. Yeah. Like that, we're going to come back to the bridge as well. I think that's a fab term. Sarah, Steph, Susan, anything you want to add? Any additional requests for this session?
We talked about how we coach such people if we're doing a one-to-one coaching. I've written it down somewhere, but I can't find it now. Well, yeah, what are the potential areas we could coach to help them to focus?
Yeah, definitely. We can absolutely do that. Look at some of those coaching questions that might be specific to this profile. Anything else from the group?
Yeah, just I think something around saying, when you're sort of talking about types and you're kind of describing the types of behavior you expect, and then the creative is kind of like obviously a bit different. So like for the team members, how do they relate back? So more of a team development side thing.
Yeah, how do they make the most of it, but also be aware of, like you say, when you're on the receiving end of that switch, that can be quite confusing sometimes. But how do you manage that in the team? 100%, yeah. Any more from that group before I move on?
No, just more of the same, really. I'm interested to hear from your point of view actually how it shows up for you. I haven't had a creative yet. We're not a very big company, but I haven't had that to sort of explore with somebody about what that actually means for them, how it does show up. So I am interested to kind of hear, more about the strengths of that, but also where maybe it does cause confusion or conflict, really.
I think it's only a matter of time, Sarah, before we it's
1 in 10.
Brilliant. And Deborah, Sam, comments, questions from your group, please.
Much of the same, really. It was around for Deborah, she's been doing this a long while, so it was kind of just refreshing, really. For me, it's just that continual journey of learning more about insights. As you know, Julie, I've been doing lots of coaching. So for me, it's more around how I can support that person who is the creative type to understand themselves better, but then also, like Susan was just saying, for others, how they can react and integrate with that person.
Brilliant.
If I could add from our group, just the science behind it.
Oh, yeah. Let's see how far we get with that, Alan.
Yeah.
I think we also
You know me, I love a bit of detail sometimes.
Yeah, I think we also spoke about sometimes creative types being a little bit unsure of who they were, because I mean they have that ability, as I say, to see the wider perspective, but it might also be a bit confusing for them sometimes as well. And in terms of how people also interact with them, because they're able to have that different perspective, it's like, because it could be quite a lot of pressure. And I was saying that I work with somebody that is a creative, but I've worked with them for quite some time. So when they suddenly have a conversation and flit, I'm with them, and I understand their frame of reference, but I've often seen people looking quite confused, but it's also quite useful because they're in massive transformational space.
Yeah.
They do tend to get lots of ideas on different things really quickly and are able to actually pull all those pieces together. So it does work, but it's also just going back to the point that some people may not have that awareness of how to actually cope with that what they've got. Yeah.
I agree.
Jules, can I just ask you, sorry, go on, you're going to say something.
Oh, please.
The biggest confusion I ever saw in the graphs when looking at them was that the conscious was the opposite almost of the less conscious. Are you going to talk about that some stage?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I do think that a lot of people tell me that the way that insights capture the creative type is better than any of the models. So it doesn't come to the fore, you know, when you're doing Myers-Briggs or sometimes with DISC and others, whereas it is well captured, but I think it is more of a challenge personally to understand it, and also as a facilitator. So far, we've absolutely got this. Everything you're asking us, we are going to give it to you in oodles. We might go to a level of detail you do not need, but we are on hand if it helps afterwards and you want to come back and talk to your account managers and explore further. Finally, Eleanor, Emma, Fiona, Nadine, questions? Anything you want to add?
I think for me, I often find that they are the hardest to sell on insights because they don't understand the boxing, obviously we're not boxing, but they don't relate. When you're saying, oh, where they find it harder to relate to the particular types, and they're the ones I usually have to, and I don't often know how to how to sell it to them as much, because they're just like, well, I can be all of these things. So why do I need to worry about where I am, because I'm all of these things?
And that can be a bit of an issue with the rest of the team. Go on, Lynn.
Sorry, no, I didn't mean to interrupt, but just to say I had a question at the point I wanted to say when we're doing the A types, because I use that quite a bit, you know, when they're really trying to, again, I'm not quite sure, and maybe it doesn't matter, but I don't know if there is something around that when you're creative, because you will fall into that, but of course you can swing into, I'm not quite sure. So I'd be quite interested if there is something around that. So sorry, I mean, you know.
I think that's a big question. Dilip is very kindly helping out with the next of the November workshop on the 8 types too. You know what, Lynn? Let's go back to that, because not something that we've immediately put into this webinar, but as we go through, I think we need to refer back to that. So thank you for that. Let me get the slides up. David, kick us off, because you're going to give us a bit of a perspective as to how it shows up for you.
Yeah, thank you. So this might help to answer some of those questions, because I'm going to share with you a little bit about how, as a creative type myself, how it shows up for me and how I've made sense of it. So I'm going to be talking very much from my personal story. This is my profile that I'm sharing with you. And it's a profile that has been consistent for definitely, I'd say 10 years. I must probably get a bit more accurate with the actual timings around it, but I've been in that creative space for a while. And somebody, I think Julie mentioned it a little bit earlier, having also been a Myers-Briggs practitioner and done Myers-Briggs in my early career, I never it was only it was only until I came across insights that it actually started, that was the first profile that showed this, which showed this little bit of tension, or some of you might put it, the confusion between certainly sort of the introversion and the extroversion. That's certainly displayed here in my graph. So leading with yellow, followed by cool blue, and then earth green. They're my colors. So I've got this not necessarily attention, but in terms of way, I don't see it as attention. I see it very much more, as somebody mentioned earlier, about the bridge, the ease for to go from one element to another. And I saw this is how I've made sense of it. I've come to understand that my preference, in which when we talk about extroversion, introversion, is that I've been somebody whose preference is introversion. However, I've been working in an extroverted space, extroverted world. So just to give you a bit of context around that, my background's in sales. And within sales, two things sort of happen. One is you're really very much put into, and when I first started this is about 25, maybe 30 years ago, very much in the extroverted space. For me to even to fit in as well, definitely had to dial up my sort of extroversion. So, and also with that sales element, I found it, I loved it. I love being with people. I love being out there. But I also found that sort of element, that tension of wanting to get everything done. So from a sales perspective, when you've got targets, you've got to know the plan, how you're going to get there. And this is face-to-face, not telesales. So there's a lot of preparation that happens going on. You want to, for me, the desire to make sure to get everything right before I go and see the customer. So there's that sort of introversion and the blue coming to fore of my strength, but of doing that preparation, and then going to see the customer, and then dialing up that yellow in order to be enthusiastic, positive, persuasive, influencing, but wanting to connect with people. I also found within my sales career that you have to be quite a chameleon, and you have to better change your different styles. And so I again, I have something which I know I've said many times of my career, where I would hate the idea of my friendship circle all coming together into one room for a party, for example, because I'd be worried that I've been different things to different people, and people going, oh, hang on, how come David's like that? Because that's not how I know him, because I've altered my my friendship, my relationship with that person in terms of how I met them. So I can move between these two elements, whether it's sunshine yellow, then moving back to the blue. And I know sometimes that can be confusing. I know sometimes I can be very much let's go with the flow, let's do this, etc. And then actually saying, hang on, but how are we going to get there? What we're going to do? Let's get the detail. In fact, let's really go into detail. And so I've got this for me, maybe a tiny bit of tension of going between those two. But for me, it's something I've, I say, lived with for certainly sort of over 10 years. And it's just, I find it myself moving into the extroversion space. Go for it, Julie.
So when you've got those significant arrows going up in the preference flow,
Yeah.
One of the insights interpretation, I know that we very much put it on the individual as to what does this mean to you and how are you experiencing it. One of the interpretations can be it's taking a lot of effort and energy. Does it feel like it's effort and energy, or is it quite natural to you?
We see, and again, this is where I would say, when you look at that graph, yeah, because that's definitely the coaching question I'd be asking. Wow, 50, very, very high. How much effort? Is that causing you a lot of concern? And it's not. I suppose I'm just conscious that I will put that, and certainly when I answered the questionnaire, I must probably more focus on that. But I find that blue energy comes naturally to me. It's. I think it's because the graph is not only how I completed the profile on the day, but also where I feel I need to be for the role that I was in. And so I need to, and what works well for me is to have the sunshine, the enthusiasm, persuasion, but also have that balance of the detail. And so as a facilitator, if I sort of take away from my sales career in terms of facilitating, for me, preparation, having knowing what I'm talking about, but to stand up, to be seen, to be credible, but also then to be in the room and to be enthusiastic and put my energy into that process, I find is really important. Now, what that also means is, and this is a bit where somebody talked about can be confusing on the receiving end. So my one little short story I've got before I hand back over to Julie in a moment is that I will. So when I've done some training, I'll be if I'm with a sales group, and if we're doing it over a couple of days, and I'll be putting my effort into the day. At the end of the day, say, David, we're all going down to the pub and we're going to have a drink. Are you going to come with us? And what I will do is I will make up some excuse to say, oh no, I'm really busy. I've got some other calls to do. I will, I can't come with you. And that's not because I don't want to have a drink. I love a drink. But the idea is, do you know what? I put so much effort into the day. I now just need a bit of me time. I now need to recharge, and I go back into that introversion space in order to be ready for the next day, in order to be me. And I don't see that as, I don't see it as being unauthentic around that. I see, there's authentic me. There's also a little bit, I just need a bit quiet. I now need to recharge. I think I might have said enough. I can see there's a hand up from Alan. So I'll take that question and then we'll hand over to you, Julie. I realise I'm conscious. This is my sort of detail blue. I will carry on talking, go on, and maybe go off and maybe not really give time. So, Alan, let's take your question.
No, fascinating story. And I think the question I've got is, I think we can all dial up our colours often, but it often has to be a deliberate process. So I'm not a natural scientist, but I had to go and become that detail analysis to get it. But it's a very deliberate process, and I can't do it under pressure. So is that different from you?
It does feel like, in terms of not better to do it under pressure. So I feel
or the
like
deliberate nature. Is it an instinctive flip between colours? Because I have to deliberately change my mindset to go and then jump in to do the detail and do my accounts at the end of each month and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm just curious about how that is for you.
Yeah, no, and for me, and I think it's because it's happened over quite a, this is not a transition period, unless this is like 10, 12 years of a transition. It just seems very natural, but to go from one thing to the other. The only thing I'm just becoming more aware of how it might seem to other people more confusing, because one minute I could be yay, next minute like, can we just talk about this? Well, hang on, aren't we all doing all? Yeah, it doesn't really matter, it really matters. Can we just get to the detail bit? And that flip can I'll be interesting. I suppose I never really asked what's it like for other people on the receiving end of David, going between the two. But
and under pressure, what are you like under pressure?
Under pressure, I feel like I most probably go more to that so my less conscious graph, and so more green, so I could become more concerned. I definitely become more the introversion side so more quiet.
Interesting. Thank you.
So that's a little bit insight to me. Judy, do you want to tell your story?
So you will see that my graphs are quite different. So rather than being accommodating with a 3 above the line like David, I've got the 1 above the line. And for me, this was, I think, a set period in my work life that prompted some of the graph. However, I still feel the green-red tension, and that's very real to me. It's very much been with me over the last few weeks, even though this is an older graph. So my personal explanation of this, throughout my profiles through 12, 15 years, the green remains predominantly high. However, when this graph was produced, I was working in a very high red culture. I had a very strong high red boss. I almost caught the culture. Everything had to be done yesterday. I was channeling it through the roof. And you can see in my less conscious, that red really isn't there. But it was a very strong requirement of what I needed to do, specifically in a work context. And I would really easily flip, and it wouldn't be conscious. I would have been in a meeting and I want to be collaborative, I'm engaging, I'm listening, and then suddenly I'm looking at the time thinking, right, we're going to make a decision and we're going to get on. And then I'll walk out of the meeting and I'll be back in the green and thinking, oh my God, I just think I've been really offensive. What have I just done? So there is a personal tension for me. And I got feedback from colleagues as well, who would say to me, we never quite know what we're going to get from you, Julie. Dilip, I was working with Vicky Burney at the time, and Vicky was really good in giving me some of these comments because she would see this flip and we were both working under pressure. For me, it's often a gift. I think it's a real positive, and perhaps it tempers some of the plodding slowness of the green because it does bring that shift. But personally, it is what I interpret as the slightly, have I been ruthless? Have I been a bit offensive? I don't want to be perceived as being aggressive, but it's a very strong push. Does that make sense? And I think there are absolutely tensions within the creative types. I think there are often personal tensions within the creative types. When I'm debriefing a profile with someone who's high creative, one of my common comments or something we look at is the churn that it can create. Because where you've got someone potentially working across introversion, extroversion, thinking, feeling, they're seeing it from all these different perspectives. And that can create quite a lot of noise up here. As they're, so that sometimes it can lead to real, I wonder, overthinking and overfeeling of the situation too. Any questions on that?
Alan's got his hand up. He's obviously not. He's actually using his real hand, not the.
Yeah, well, I can't find that at the moment because I might have done something with my screen. So, what's the difference between accommodating? Because accommodating, you've got 3 colours above the line, and so my understanding was that they often have multiple perspectives on different situations that they bring to the forefront, but often find it difficult to make decisions because they're considering too many things. Whereas reds just go for the, just the blunt and obvious answer.
And if I just come in there, Julie, just say, so between Julie and myself, I can recognize that. I recognize that in myself. So for me to make a decision, it's quite a process internally in order to make the decision. And where they don't, there's must be a lot of procrastination and a lot of research that goes into my decision making. Whereas I see in Julie, and when I work with Julie, and sort of to bring you in on this one, Julie, but it sounds like even from that last example, you go to a point where you go, yeah, right, let's make a decision and let's do it. Whereas, I'm sort of, hey, well, hang on, let's get some more information here. Let's get some more research. Let's just think about this. Let's consider, let's go and collaborate. Let's get everything in and then make that that decision. I don't know how you, Julie,
And
would
Dave,
add to
that
that.
could be because of your stronger blue than in my
Mhm.
or it could be because you've got the accommodating 3 above the line, and I have got a very focused green above the line. And therefore, what my words, I'm saying to you, I'm concerned that I'm being offensive. That is such a green preference, isn't it? Really worried about that. So perhaps if that was tempered, Alan, and it wasn't focused, but it was accommodating, you would have a creative type who didn't have that, that wasn't so strong a drive for them. So that's interesting, isn't it? With those rare graphs where you have got 1 above the line for the creative, that might still remain quite a strong drive for them, even though they're dancing around the other colours. Go on, David, take us on.
Okay,
so we're going to explore this as we go through.
Okay, yeah, lovely. Yeah, okay. So just a couple of slides here. You may have heard this phrase about being an ambivert, and some people might use that. And so these are just 2 slides from Insights, which may be helpful for your pack as well, where it talks about I love meeting new people, but my social energy has a time limit, so I need some time alone to recharge. So maybe I think I'm ambivert. And there's another one here on the next slide, Julie, which just talks about, I prefer no distractions so I can concentrate on my work, but every so often I enjoy having a tea break with my colleagues. And there is this thing of just recognizing some of those different preferences, isn't it, that we might bring to that. And so in terms of recognizing, I've just got to read this slide. I'm just going to read something from a slide that happened a little bit earlier. You might have seen it, but I'm going to go back over to it. So as creative types, we have easy access to all the color energies, but particularly the opposite color energies. And for example, so an individual may be sharing a warm, harmonious discussion using their green energy preference, and in the next moment state abruptly that everybody needs to get to work, engaging their red energy. And again, I sort of heard that from Julie's example where she was talking, just saying, but earlier, where she was saying about how in that situation, might say, right, now let's make a decision. Then that might seem to people around her, cool, wow, okay, right, let's go on and do that. Another example, an individual could be outwardly and easily engaged socially with colleagues, enthusiastically sharing their thoughts, using their yellow energy, and then in the next moment could be seen as being very formal, very logical, very reserved as they go about their business using their blue energy. So it's they talk about it being a juxtaposition, between those opposites, can be confusing for colleagues in that person if they don't have a clear preference, or in fact holds the opposites at play at the same time. And I think somebody mentioned this, didn't they, in terms of your groups when you were talking about, oh grief, how does it come across? Is it quite confusing? And I would imagine depending on your own self-awareness, isn't it, in terms of how you might recognize some of those particular elements. Emma, I can see you've got your hand up. Go for it. What's your question?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, because in both of your examples, yours, David, and Julie's, yours sound very much like learned behaviours. So Julie mentioned being in a very red environment, and of course you've been in sales, so dialed up your yellow. So my question is it more often than not a learned behaviour in that way, or do some people just naturally creative types?
It's a great question, Emma. Nice segue. Because what Insights initially, when Insights were looking at creative types, they saw them as profiles in transition. And therefore, the work context, what was happening in life in that moment, and those learnt behaviours to manage that might well have influenced. However, what they've since seen over their 25, 30 years is that some people just retain and stay throughout that in creative type, and it is just them. It is just how they work and how they operate. We're going to send you 2 bits of information after this. There is a PDF with some basic information that I think is really helpful to share with colleagues who have creative profiles. And there is a more in-depth link that I think as facilitators is helpful, but you need to read it first before you share it, because insights, and I'm not sure how robust the research is around this, say that there can be some key reasons why this is how people operate in this way. They talk about whether or not, and I don't know if it's had an impact on me. I've had an introverted mum, and sorry, an extroverted mum and an introverted dad. So they talk about parents who have very different styles and whether or not that has influenced. They also talk about the potential for childhood challenges that might have influenced this and perhaps created someone who is not in the insight sense, but perhaps needs to be accommodating in order to get through challenges. Now, there's a time when I've received these profiles and under stress, and I do not want someone delving to that depth. So read it yourself before you decide to share it. But those are some of the explanations that are given for people for whom this is just an ongoing natural style. It could be work, it could be learned, it could be that response, in that moment. And therefore, you do find people who, when they come out of it, maybe they've just moved into a new role. Maybe it's promotion, maybe they're leading a particularly high-risk project, maybe there is a pressure that they are under in order to perform, or a challenge that they're up against that is absolutely creating this. And therefore, give it a year or two. If the situation changes, they can come out of it. Or you don't cut yourself in half to come to work. It could be all sorts of transition of, as we grow, as we age, as we go through major life events like separation, bereavement. I wonder lockdown as well might have had quite a significant influence on people. So you have the broader explanation of being in some form of transition. Okay, so some are going to stay there throughout the time that they are profiled. I have moved out around that postcode, so never very far away, but it's similar. Does that make sense? Emma, does that answer your question though?
It does, thank you. It does.
I'm always conscious with this. You know your colleagues, and the extent to which you can delve into some of this, and the extent to which actually we need to focus on a work conversation.
And I would just add to that in terms of, for me, it does explain my, I find it's quite helpful looking at my creative profile, because I recognize it. Yeah, that's me. This is me doing a bit of my facilitation, and then this is also maybe so help to explain so why I also need the time to recharge and that time for myself. But also I know that if I spend too much time, so when I'm working at home, if I spend too much time planning at home, I then have got a real need to pick up the phone and speak to people. And then I'm really excited about seeing people. But then if I spend a whole day speaking to people, I'm there, just need a bit of time by myself. So I've got this thing that sort of goes backwards and forwards. And so this helps to explain it. So I suppose when I share this with other people I might work with, it's not it's more of a relief for me to say, look, this is how I'm working, and it's fine for me. I don't find it a struggle, but for me it helps to explain how I have been working.
So I think it can, as with any profile, regardless of where we are on the wheel, I think it can create these aha moments of, I get that now. For the individual, so I get why, I can flick like that, or why there's that tension, or how it can work. And for the team going, quite often when a team is working with a creative type, depending on the profile, I'll get the comment, they're an absolute chameleon. I have that word, a lot, because of their ability to flex around. Now you add that to a huge dollop of good emotional intelligence, brilliant, really helpful, but if not confusing. And I think these graphs, so we're going to do some more wider coaching questions in a sec, but specifically around the graphs. For me personally, if they've not had the profile before and I've just given it to them in there and then in that moment, I am really keen for them to read the text, read the pages 5 and 6, the overview, and tell me how accurate it is for them. I particularly push this with the creative graph because I want to ensure that what it's saying is accurate. And I guess there's a bit of me with that computer generated nature of the text thinking, how well is this going to capture them? And are there going to be statements that seem quite contradictory in the text? Because sometimes I'll get the response that I'm not quite getting the text, but as soon as we turn to the graphs and we start to talk about and explore the graphs, it fits into place. And they'll find the explanation of the graphs far more fitting than the text. We would do this with any profile. We would always check, the text. But sometimes with the creative graphs, you'll find that they get that aha moment with the graphs. Okay. But you've got a real difference. Just look at, David's graph at the bottom and my graph at the bottom. David perhaps is more likely, I never had the feedback of, being a chameleon because I do have, certain stronger styles. Whereas when you've got, and I was debriefing online with someone yesterday with a creative graph, they were so balanced across the 4, so balanced. And their ability, and they were talking about how easy it was to work across the 4. It can create an issue with the team, exactly as you've already told us, because they're going, I don't really get a difference between these different styles, whereas for others with very particular preferences, they do. And so there can be a sense from the creative type, depending on their level of emotional intelligence, of, well, why can't everyone do this? Because I'm flitting around and not even realizing it. And not sometimes with a creative type, you might get the comment that they're really struggling to distinguish across the 4 colors because their ability to access it. Whereas if you've got someone with a graph like mine, that is less likely to happen.
And I was going to just add to that, Julia, the bit which we haven't shown, and I've never known what to call it. But underneath those 3 graphs, there's another visual.
Footprint or imprint.
Footprint or imprint. And so hopefully you all know what we're talking about. It's that little circle with the colors, and inside it is a dark line showing the balance between, for the graph on the left, the conscious will, and then a lighter line showing the less conscious will. So it's another way of looking at the graphs, but just in a visual element. And sometimes you can see those areas where we talked about somebody being more balanced. And I look at the footprint. Yes, it is a good name for it, isn't it? Because you can just see how much space is being used up for a balance between all those colors, as opposed to where we know somebody's very strong in one particular color. You can see it's been stretched towards, it's almost like pointing towards the color energy. So that can be a useful element as a way for creative types to point them to that footprint graph and actually just show another way of looking at those graphs in a visual element as well.
And David's graphs is very much overlapping and equal across introversion, extroversion, thinking, feeling. Mine are the pointy ones that are really quite different. I struggle a little bit with the preference flow in the creative graph, simply because you will always, because of the mathematics of it, you will always have first 2 colors. So you've got the yellow, blue in David's, and you'll automatically, because of the way that the less conscious is worked out, you'll automatically have the green and the red higher. Similar for mine. It results every time in significant ups and downs. For me, I always focus on the size of those arrows, and I will suggest that that the person receiving the profile ignores that percentage underneath, because you can see I've got way more movement in mine, a lot more happening there. I've got a much smaller number, it's a 7%, whereas David's got less movement but a much higher number. So because the way that those graphs are worked out, I say that any movement upwards is a positive number, any movement downwards is a negative number. So mine almost cancel out. I've seen huge movement in these graphs and a 0% simply because of that. So for me, I would recommend ignoring that number and focus on the ups and downs in the charts.
And that's where we might come on to some of those coaching questions. If you was doing a debrief, I'd be asking something like, "Oh, I see. Now, David, there's if it's the blue and the yellows is really high, going up. That suggests you're putting a lot of effort into that. How does that show up for you? Do you recognize that?" And see if they come up with their own awareness, especially if you're working with people who maybe don't recognize their own creative type, in themselves, if they don't have that awareness. Whereas for me, if this, as I've said before, this was a great aha moment, a great moment of, that explains why I am like I am, type of thing. So I welcomed it, where some people might go, well, no, I don't, what's the problem? Aren't we all like this? Can't we all move around and do whatever we want? Which might be another, I think I heard someone just say about that.
This next one, number 4, is an insight statement. So the 2 lead colours in the conscious graphs will have a more profound impact. David and I have had quite a debate over this. What a profound impact really means. For me personally, I've never really aligned with the blue-yellow. The red-green, 100%, that has a meaning to me. I can see how I use that and how it can be helpful to me. Whereas the less conscious graph for me has never really particularly resonated. So I guess personally, that conscious graph has a more profound impact. And also, if you were to ask people around me, they wouldn't necessarily see, I think, the blue, certainly in the yellow, as much as. However, I think what we came to agree, kind of, David, was that what you're seeing in the preference flow is that for David, it's the blue-yellow that he is dialing up and seeing a benefit from in those environments and in those interactions. Whereas for me, I guess it is the red in particular, isn't it? The size of that red arrow going up, and the green that I am more likely to resonate with, that my team members are more likely to see, and that I am seeing a benefit of. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we're going on really, what's the phrase, David, when you're not quite sure what you're talking about? I'm not quite sure what this one, how this plays out either. So David and I were saying that we need a webinar just on the dominant functions, because if you remember, and some of you have been on accreditation much more recently than me, when you've got your mat, you have got the F's and the S's and the N's around the outside, and saying that these will have a significant impact on how that individual turns up. Every single creative type has either sensing or intuition as the dominant function. In the information I'm going to send you, there's this little explanation here. So what you might see, and as David and I have spoken about this, for both our conscious and our less conscious, there is a strong degree of sensing. And that is really true for us. We're both quite immediate, give us tangible, concrete information that we can understand. Don't talk about it in the abstract. So if you're doing a deeper dive with an individual and you've managed to cover this within the introductory workshop and you find it's useful for them, then you might want to go here. Or it might just be a quick check before you do the debrief. Have I got someone who is really focused with the sensing, in which case the way that I explain this, the examples I use are going to need to be immediate and practical and pragmatic. Or have I got someone who is going to be far more abstract in this conversation and interested in it in that way? Go for it, Eleanor.
That's right. Does that mean then that the flex is in only the extroversion, introversion, thinking, feeling, but they will just have one between the sensing and intuition, or do they flex between sensing and intuition as well?
I'm not going to 100% say that it's the latter, but I think that could well be true.
Okay.
Especially because, yeah, that makes total sense to me.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I hadn't really considered how the intuition sensation plays into it.
Yeah. And I think this is why, there's it's a wider conversation, and as Julie just said, we're still trying to make real sense of this, but so I'm going back to like the sensing style part here in terms of giving some facts here. So there are 24 will positions where creative types will be. And interestingly, between their between the two graphs, you will get that preference. So between the conscious and the less conscious, you'll notice that there will be that preference regarding either sensing and or intuition. And in my case, and I think as Julie was just saying as well, there's definitely the real dominant of the sensing over the intuition.
Okay. For me personally, I think this is a whole separate webinar as to how the dominant functions, attitudes work. I started having a look at it yesterday and thought, oh my word, this is going to be a learning curve for me when I come to do this. This is probably exactly why I need to do it. So I'm going to move us on at this stage, because some of the questions, I'm conscious these are so generic. And when I looked back on these, I thought, actually, we probably use these regardless of, the wheel position. And there is, in the Insights guidance, what I like is they say, this isn't about something special. This is just one of many wheel positions, and we are all unique. We are all special in our own way. So I like that idea of not making a thing about this. And actually, so your standard coaching questions will stand you in good stead. A very open question as to, are you aware of this, the diversity of your style at the moment? How does it play out? And to ask them, are there times when, give me an example when you've moved across this from one to the other. Now, you might get more of a response from someone with a profile like me with some strong preferences than you'll have across the really flat, real chameleon type profile. So it might be different based on who you are coaching. And as with any profile, but I think particularly with the creatives, are you getting any feedback around this? No, because how are people seeing it? How do you think it's being perceived by others? And I always find that fascinating when people say to me, well, I've got no idea. Do you ask for feedback? Can you use this in order to generate some comments in order to spark that? Because we know quite often people don't stop and have these conversations. David, interrupt me at any point on this.
Yeah, so I was going to just come in with the next one actually. Well, I was going to build on that one, but so the next one talks about, does it cause tension for you, for the team? So I think it's again, as Julie sort of said right at the beginning. So this is a question you would ask anybody in terms of their profile. When you look at your profile, does this cause attention for you and team? You leading with these two colors now. So whether they are two of the opposite type, or whether it's the two of your top two colors, so it's a great question. I think it just might be you might get a bit more of an interesting conversation from the individual, and again, I think it's back to how aware is the individual of themselves in terms of this profile for them, and so asking them about that and helping to raise awareness. And of course, that's what coaching is really all about, isn't it? When one of the key things is about how much to raise someone's own awareness. And if this might be the first time they've done this, first time we're doing this type of element, this is actually giving them linking to other. This is actually giving them some feedback, isn't it? This is feedback that says this is how this is how this profile's come out for you on the day that you completed it, and it's saying that you've got that tension. Do you recognize yourself in that? And it just, does that cause no intentions? And I say, For me, no, it was more that, yeah, oh, right, that's it. That's why. That makes sense. But for some other people, it might be, oh, right, that's why this happens like that. And then it might be asking this thing about, they talked about this transition element as well. So, Julie.
We found this a really interesting statement from the Insights literature, so I wanted to share this with you. So Insights say the key to coaching creative type is to focus on the impact of the first two in the conscious and the lead in the less conscious. I thought that just added a really different flavour, and for me it kind of makes sense personally, because my red green in the conscious is, I guess, to a degree tempered by the blue. There is a degree of higher introversion that the blue brings for me. If you were to ask me about my less conscious yellow, it would have very little meaning to me. I would struggle more to really perceive that in self. I know it's there, 100%. I know it's there. And in more recent profiles, that has come more to the fore. So I just thought that was a really interesting statement from Insights.
Yeah, I do, and I like it, and I definitely, I'm on that. I get that too, and I think it's really, again, in fact, the graph you've got is actually my graph, isn't it, down there? And as you're saying that, I think definitely can see the green being influenced. And imagine, I suppose there's a part of me that says, oh, so imagine if I hadn't dialed up my blue and my yellow, what you'd most probably say, the green would still be quite high, wouldn't it? Because that's, when you look at the less conscious, that's the influence by that. So I think that's a lovely question to think and help to bring those two graphs alive at the same time when you're doing that coaching part.
And I think finally on this one, as we've said, this gives such a lovely framework to someone, regardless of where they are on the wheel. But in particular for the creative types, the colour language, I think, helps them to distinguish where am I actually standing in the moment. So I've often recommended for someone with a creative profile, in going forward, when you're in a meeting, when you're in a one-to-one, just take that moment and think, where am I stood at this moment in time, just to build that self-awareness and that awareness of the potential impact that they might have on the other person. There's some interesting kind of comments from Insights of this around the stress position with the creative type. And they've said that creative types are less likely to have a very strong stress response. It is more likely to come from where they are operating from in that moment. So it can look quite different, just like their, great day, good day behaviors are looking different. So can the stress behaviors. When it comes to colleagues and how they're then operating within the team, again, huge gift to have. Alan, go for it.
So one of the questions I was just looking for and waiting, hoping that you do, is how do you make this a super strength? It's just, we naturally tend to look at the things that we're doing wrong, but actually my experience is actually when you can focus on things that we do well, and how do you be better at being a creative type. I'm just curious where that sits within your set of questions.
So one of the aspects of the creative type can be that it's coming back to the bridge. It can be a really good bridge within the team where you've got differences within the team. The creative type may be, and I'm hesitant because this is going to depend on their level of emotional intelligence, I would say. But you may have a creative type who can really bridge between different styles within the team and are able to see it from the different perspectives and therefore help colleagues in order to understand each other and perhaps find consensus as well. So that's absolutely one of those aspects, I would say. As with all of this, I'm a little bit cautious about singling out the type, because as with anyone, as long as they're working with great emotional intelligence, they will be able to stand in all of these different aspects. And I guess it's one of those gifts that this is going to be far more easier for some creative types, especially where they've got the 2 or 3 above the line. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Alan. And I'm wondering what else. There is like a real range and a real flexibility that someone with this style can potentially bring. That ability to bridge kind of different styles. However, can be really confusing. Incongruous is interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost questioning my my ethics, my authenticity. And because you're seeing this flick that others aren't able to do themselves, can be perceived as, you know, you're trying to be everything, which almost to me, underneath that statement, there's a little bit of fake manipulation kind of behind it as well, which is not the case. Not the case. And I have seen it in teams where the team is just having that moment of thinking, I get it now. I get it. Well, I'm just like never too sure what I'm going to get from you. So can bring great insight. David, anything you want to add at this stage?
No, I think it's just conscious. I was going to go on to the next bits actually, if that's helpful as well, just to keep it sort of flowing. So it talks about the creative may feel frustrated that others don't have the same flex. I think the next one also then talks about stress responses may be less extreme and driven by color that they're standing in at that moment. So maybe seen as aggressive, withdrawn in different settings. And again, I do recognize myself in that thing of the withdrawal element in certain situations. I also recognize in myself those things about wanting to be all things to all people. And I think that's that, you know, that tension, you know, if it's a tension, I don't know, the tension's for me, isn't it? Not for other people, but, you know, the thing of wanting to be things, everything to everybody as well.
I've certainly had the feedback from Colourworks colleagues who have seen my red, and are quite, thank you, Alan, and are quite clear with me. Julie, you think you're so green, but that's really not the case. And I absolutely think of moments where I've been very definite and very direct and very driven. However, there are also moments when I'm conscious I'm in meetings and I am not saying a thing, even though I might disagree with something, because my green harmony just says, just hold it, and not helpful. So you almost get the potential for bad day around the wheel, which is, yeah, that's a double dose, isn't it, David?
Yes.
And as with everything with this, it just really, really helps at understanding, I think particularly so with this type. And the insights, advice and guidance is no different from what you would see of any other wheel position. You know, it's simply about bringing that understanding, valuing it, and using the language. So, you know, when Vicky would say to me, you are incredibly high red at the moment, Julie, I'm not sure that that's really helping. Brilliant feedback, hugely helpful. David, question.
Yeah, I think so. I think this will be the great opportunity for people to. We've got about 9 minutes left, just to check back in with you and say, okay, so we've been talking through lots of bits about. We share some of our stories. You know, let's hear from you. What other questions, what other comments might you have as you consider what you've been hearing, as you relate it to your maybe some of your elements? What else can we help you out with before we've only got one more slide, which is basically telling you what's happening next. So we've got a little bit of time just to have any of your questions and comments. So what are you thinking out there? What's as you process information?
I think for me, it's really it has been a bit of a light bulb moment. I've just been thinking about my direct report and my boss, and I was telling Dilip and Lynn earlier, while we were talking, it made me go and look at our team wheel as a team.
Yes.
And I didn't pick up on this, but my boss is a creative type. But you know, just hearing everything today, it really puts it into context, because gosh, you never really know where you stand with him. But in the nicest possible way. And one of the things that I'd mentioned in the beginning was, he'll come across very a lot of empathy and very hi, how you doing? And the green will come out really well. And then all of a sudden it'll be, right, we've got 10 minutes and we need to go through X, Y, and Z, or 15 minutes, and you just have to adapt. But now I understand why. And it also makes sense. One of the things that no one from work on this call, the other thing that also kind of frustrates the rest of the team, I guess, is he can never really make decisions. And we know what the decision needs to be, but we need him to sign off on it. So it might be hiring someone in the team, for example, and we know it's going to take 3 months to find the right person. We need to get that ball rolling now. But in their mind, they're thinking about so many other things before they can make that decision. And so a lot of things fall on our lap at the last point in time, at the 11th hour. So it frustrates my peers and myself when we get something which should have really come to us a few weeks ago, but it's landing in our lap today for tomorrow. But this helps me understand why the kind of mechanics of that works.
Priya, I really like what you're saying about that shift in pace as well that you're saying. And I wonder if that is one of the ways that people pick up some of this. We're slow, we're talking. No, no. Oh, no, we can talk about it. No. Yeah, I think that's really interesting in how we see it. Alan?
Can I just answer the question? What's the thing that do you think flips him from the one color to the other color? Because I think that's really useful to understand for all of the creatives.
Yeah.
Well, all of us.
I guess, my boss had worked in yesterday we had a call, and every time I've got something with me, whether it be a coffee or a bagel, he's worked in all the industries out there. So he'll start the conversation of, oh, is that a Woburton bagel, or is that, is that a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi? Or I work for Coca-Cola and we did this. So go off into a conversation, and I'm thinking we've got half an hour, and I know you've asked for this call, not me. But I will go with the conversation because we've both got the yellow in us as well. And it's really interesting to hear, all the experiences. But then all of a sudden he will, I don't know if he's looking at the screen or something's popped up, that 15-minute kind of, you got 15 minutes left has popped up. And right, now we need to go and talk about X, Y, Z. And then I'm still in bagel mode or Coca-Cola mode. And I was really enjoying that conversation. But of course, we're here for a meeting for something completely different. So I don't know what it is, but he can go off on tangents. We love him. He's amazing as an individual. And I think that's the conflicting part for us, is the frustrations really appear. We love Paul. But the one bugbear we all have is, why are we getting this today? And why have we not got this last week? He's not giving us any time. But he also understands that he does that. So I think he's very, very aware. But we adapt to him because we all love him, and we will do, we'll move heaven on earth to make sure that the things are in for the times that he needs it, because we don't want to disappoint him. So yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure. It might not be that. It could just be the red kicking in as part of his ability to be able to flex throughout the different preferences as the day goes by or the hour goes by. But yeah,
I do wonder if there's something about it's pressure of time, pressure of delivery, and creates that.
It's a red trigger, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess I'm talking from my personal experience, that really holds true for me.
And I think one thing that we could possibly all do if we're dealing with that is work out how we get them into the side that we want them to be in at that moment.
That's called manipulation, I think.
Yeah, maybe. But instead of, if you know you're going to struggle with a red response, but they have the green and the red, is how do I make sure that they're in their green mode when I have this conversation with them?
Yeah, I agree, Eleanor, because especially when I personally might not be recognizing that or seeing it in the moment, and whether or not there is something around the insights language that enablers, and within a team session, whether there can be honesty in the group of this is the gift and this is the challenge of working with you, Julie, and what do you want in those moments? Are you okay? Because in those moments, I might not invite the feedback, but I'll be very happy to receive it. And so I need to trust the team that they will tell me in a way that's going to work. So I guess that's where some of the insights workshops come in, or the coach, to encourage that. First off, I need to notice it. And then second off, you know, it's not an excuse. I do need to regulate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really conscious we haven't gone back to 8 types. And I guess my initial thoughts around that are, it's such a more simplistic approach that is so much more accessible, but doesn't allow us to do the subtleties, perhaps, you know, that we can with the more detailed profile. So I'm not sure how much within an 8 types you even have the chance to do that depth. I don't think in the model, the 8 type model itself, it is clear around creative types. So whether that's part of your questioning on the day is to understand what secondary colours are and how that might play out.
And there is something in the 8 type booklet which does show there's 8 areas where there's creative types. So slightly different with the wheel, which you can see from the 8 type booklet, which again, I think we'll go very much more into that next session. So as we're coming really near to the end, we just want to say thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for your questions. This further information and support, Julie?
I'm going to email it across to everyone. Be a little bit careful about that online explanation, because it does dig a little bit as to why this might have happened and why someone might be working in that way. The PDF guidance I would share readily with anyone.
Great, thank you. And of course, do join us for next session, which is on the 13th of November between 3 and 4:30, where we talk more about delivering rate types, of which we're going to add. Most probably a little bit about the creative types as well. So as we just come up to 10:59, we want to say thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Thank you for being part of this. We will stop recording in a moment, and we look forward to seeing you on the next session. So thank you for being part of today's webinar.
Guys, thank you ever so much. Any final questions? If you do want to stay in line, we'll answer as much as we can. Otherwise, remember, we're here to help. Let us know if you need anything.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much, guys. Really